With that, Eric Christopher.
18 years ago, I was sitting in a room full of therapists. I was wrapping up my master's degree program in marriage and family therapy, and it was a Thursday afternoon, and we were doing our customary check-in for the week, and that was my internship. And so when it got to me, I said, well, things are going pretty well. I'm happy to be finishing up this master's program, and I'm wrapping up my master's thesis. And then someone said, oh, what's your master's thesis on? And I said, oh, it's on exploring the effectiveness of past life regression therapy. Dead silence in the room. I got blank stares. And then I noticed my heart started beating really fast. And I looked over at the door, and it was as though I had tunnel vision. And the only thought that came into my head was, I got to get out that door. They might kill me. Well, that was a panic attack symptoms. And fast forward about 6 months after that, maybe a year after that, I've wondered, what is that? What was that? Not of fear. And I thought, well, I'm going to get some answers to this. So when I was on the plane to go to some past life regression therapy in Maryland, it was one of in the past life regression therapy training, it was we have to divide off and be guided, and then we guide people. And when I was being guided, that was my statement of intent, or what I wanted to look under. What is that fear about? And I regressed back to a life where it was about 1,000, 2,000 years ago. I was walking around in some dusty climate, and I was a teacher, and I was teaching about perhaps my version of the Word of God. I don't know what I was speaking, but I went to a town, and they didn't necessarily like what I had to say, and so they killed me by rolling a huge boulder over my chest and collapsing all the air out of my lungs. And then afterwards, that correlated to a recurring dream I would always be having up until that point of in these dreams I would be trying to tell somebody something emphatically, but I had no air in my lungs. After that regression session, it released considerably. And now I'm very happy and delighted to be able to be here today, no longer, and speak to you without those fears holding me back. I could not have done that 18 years ago. I probably would have been out that door. But what might help is if I could get a little guarantee that nobody's going to kill me afterwards for anything that I have to say. Anyway, it's a delight being invited here today to be able to speak about my passion, which is about helping people connect to their own inner guidance system, their own higher self, for the purposes of healing. Healing. One definition of healing, Carl Jung talks about healing and says healing is about making conscious that which is unconscious, or unconscious programs that hold us back. Once we become aware of them, they don't have that same grip on us. Another definition of healing is becoming more whole and complete. And the paradox here is that we already are whole and complete. That's just a higher dimension. We are these multi-dimensional beings, and there's an aspect of ourself that's already whole and complete. And we are these amazing, magnificent, brilliant souls coming in here and infusing ourselves to this body. But that brilliance, that light, it gets covered up in the human experience. It gets covered up in the programming and conditioning of this life and of past lives. And so healing is more about it's a subtraction process. We're releasing something. So our true light can shine. And that's what I help people do through two ways, which I'm going to talk about today. And one of them is called with Past Life Regression and Life Between Lives. And the other is more of a present life. So I work in two modes. There's two types of sessions. One is these deep inner journeys. And another way of working, which I really want to share today, because this is important to know. When I do the present life type of work, it's more about meeting a feeling in the body, an unwanted program. And it's kind of instinctual for us as humans to kind of get away from our fears or whatever limiting thought that's holding us back, whatever limiting belief, maybe it's some heavy stuck feeling, it's to distract ourselves or kind of get away from it. But that movement kind of keeps it stuck. What helps and what helps release it is actually by letting your full consciousness go into that feeling. And so that's what I'll have people do when they come. I'll ask them, well, come to a session with that in mind that you most want to let go of or release. Maybe it's a stuck feeling. Maybe it's some anxiety or depression. But within that anxiety or depression, within that actually is the keys to help let it go. There's wonderful techniques out there and practitioners doing healing work, but what I found helpful is just to let a person go in, meet that feeling in the body and interview it. It's as though we put that feeling, that knot of energy, that thought form energy under a microscope. And what are the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs that make this up? And if you let your consciousness just feel it in the body, that which you most want to let go of, something magical happens because we shift from thinking mode to feeling mode. And Leonard Jacobson, who I remember coming this very place, would say, when you're in your thinking, you're not in the present moment when you're in your thinking mode, but when you're in your feeling mode, you're anchored in the present moment. And when you're anchored in the present moment, you can access that subconscious mind, and that feeling itself of anxiety or depression, we can go into it and it will show you where it came from, the emotional roots of it. Where did this come from? Maybe a junior high scene, maybe a scene when you were 5 years old, maybe all the way into the womb. Occasionally, the reason why a lot of times unworthy programs can begin in the womb is because there's no ego boundary between the fetus and the mom. So if mom is very stressed out, she's a teenage mom and doesn't know if she wants to have this baby, or there's a lot of shame, that can somehow get imprinted in the cellular memory of the baby, of the fetus. And other ways of... So what we can do, though, is we can find out where it all came from, feel it in the body, and then with your will and intent in the present moment, release that, let it go. Get back a part of you that was lost when it came on. And people will generally feel that energy leaving, coming back, and what comes back is a lighter energy, a feeling of love, empowerment, strength. And this is something that people can do on their own in their own healing meditation. So I really want to cover that present life stuff that I do because it's important, I think, to be able to we carry the past traumas in our body, and the keys of releasing it is to meet it in the body, or any type of body kind of therapy to help release it, helps liberate us. And one other technique that is very helpful that anyone can do, even on their own, is to take that unwanted feeling and feel the emotional energy of it, And if you drop through it, you just feel it, let your consciousness be in the heart and center of it, just for a few seconds. And then you imagine dropping through into what's beneath that. Maybe you drop through to a different emotional pattern. Maybe you drop through from sadness. Maybe underneath that is anger. Maybe underneath that is some unworthy program. But then as you eventually go through these layers, it becomes lighter and lighter and freer, and eventually you just fall through into pure freedom and expansiveness. There's nowhere else to go. Why is that? Because we can't separate ourselves from that higher part of us. We can't separate ourselves from all of the freedom, love, joy, security that we're seeking. It's there. When people drop through into source energy, and that's what it feels like, source energy, it's just pure awareness, unfiltered consciousness, but there's freedom of what you just went through. And that level of consciousness brings a lot of clarity, a lot of insight, a lot of wisdom. And that's basically a shortcut route to connect to your higher self. The pain actually becomes a portal to that deep peace within, or the peace beyond all understanding is what has been quoted in the Bible. So that's more of the present life work that I do. And I wanted to mention that before I started talking about past life regression and life between lives, because that's another great route to connect with your own higher self and higher guidance system. So I'll tell the story. A lot of people will ask me, well, how did you get into past life regression? And that's a good question, because I grew up, my dad was a Methodist pastor, and so we didn't talk a heck of a lot about reincarnation. But I traced the roots of it back to when I graduated from college. I couldn't find a teaching job, and I felt kind of like a failure. But of course, out of failures comes our greatest opportunities for growth. And so I decided to teach English in Taiwan, and I was able to save some, money to pay back some student loans, and then do some traveling after that. And from there, I went to India, Nepal, and Thailand. But when I was in India, I decided to work at the Mother Teresa Home for the Destitute and Dying. And I got there, and I didn't know exactly what to do. So there was a man that was directing it, said, well, why don't you go over to this man over here, he's dying. So I went there as this impressionable 24-year-old and sat with this man. And he looked at me and he started talking to me. But he was talking in a local dialect, Bengali. And I tried to communicate to him that I don't really understand what you're saying, but it didn't seem to matter to him. We were talking, and he held out his arms, and I grabbed his arms, and then he just died. He became this cold, hard shell. And I think that's the moment that the seeds began to spin in my brain. What was it that just left? His heat, his energy, his consciousness, his light in his eyes just left. And that shell of his body, that's not who he or what he was. Who or what was he? That shell wasn't him. In fact, we took that shell later of the body and carted it out through the streets and past some kids playing kickball in the streets, and they looked at the dead body and then went back to playing their game. Death is seen a little bit differently in India. Imagine bringing a dead body in the streets here. But that was when the seeds got planted of who or what are we? What is this as soul? So that began germinating. And then about 6 years later, I stumbled across a book called Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. Maybe some of you have heard that, but essentially Michael Newton was a psychologist and a skeptic, he didn't really believe in any past lives, but he would have his clients regress to the root of their issues. And many times, or a few times, they were in other lives. And he didn't know what to make of that because he didn't believe in reincarnation at the time. But then he started grilling some of them with questions. What is your name? One person was in World War I, and that was the source of their back issue. But he would ask, what was your name, rank, commanding officer, what's your hometown? Then he would actually research it and verify it. So he realized, okay, maybe these are actual historical past lives. So then he thought, well, what happens if after the person dies, I regress them a little bit deeper, where does their soul go? So he did that for 3,600 people. And he found out that there's a lot of commonalities here between what the people were saying where their soul went in these deep regression experiences. And not only that, but there was so many commonalities between what everyone was saying, and it didn't matter what their religious beliefs were. He said that's just far too much to be coincidence. And he said there's got to be this, he became convinced that there was this divine orchestration behind human life. But just those journeys that people would take, it would be similar and akin to when people have a near-death experience. They're just steeped in this love. They don't feel separate from that love. And they're able to connect with their own higher guides, their higher guidance system, and their soul groups, and even connect with loved ones in this present life that have passed over. And so when I read that book, I think I underlined every paragraph twice. This was about 20 years ago. And I just knew then that this was the work that I wanted to do. And past life regression didn't concern me as much as the fact that, hey, if there's evidence that there's an aspect of ourselves that has lived another time, that means that we're these eternal beings. We're eternal, we're indestructible. And that's what really spoke to me about past life regression. And so I'd like to speak now about past life regression. I know that there can be a lot of controversy about it because people will say, well, someone can regress back and have some memories, and then when they research it, that doesn't come up to be true. Well, yeah, that happens sometimes. But what they're missing is what past life regression really is. And if I could, I would change the name of it to higher self therapy, because what it really is connecting to your own higher self. And it's about going within. And the theme of it always is, as you go within, you get what you need, because you connect with your own inner guidance system. How do you do that? It's about getting this left brain analytical thinking mind out of the way. And then you get more and more present moment focused as you go inward, inward, inward. And hypnosis, some people are afraid of that word. Think of it as just a shortcut route to get into a deep meditation. That's really all it is. You're still awake and aware throughout the whole process, but as you go deep within, then you eventually will, throughout the process, will be able to get images of another life. Now, these images that come to you, they may be from an actual life that your soul has lived. And I can almost guarantee you, if there's a life that is really affecting you, physically, mentally, or emotionally in some way, your inner mind is going to want to take you there, or your higher guidance system is going to want to show you that so you can see it and clear it, release it from your system. But maybe some of these images aren't. Maybe they're just a symbolic metaphor that your inner mind is giving you. I don't know for sure, and I can never guarantee that, but all I can pretty much guarantee that is if you go within, your inner mind is going to orchestrate something, or your higher guidance system, your higher mind, maybe guides, who knows where it comes from, but you'll see something that is precisely for you to move forward in your life in the way that you most want to move forward in the way that can help you heal and grow the most. One of my clients was speaking to her guides, and her guide said something very profound. And it said, just as the body's instinct is to breathe, the soul's instinct is to grow and evolve. And then I thought, wow, that was so profound. It's so succinct. That's exactly what we're doing here. We're trying to grow and evolve. And how do we grow and evolve? We grow and evolve by, well, first of all, not living from the subtle fears that hold us back, any thoughts, feelings, and beliefs from the past life, this life, that hold us back from the grandeur that we are. That's what it's all about. And I'll give a few examples from here. Past life regression, what I have found, and I've guided around between 3,500 and 4,000, it's somewhere around there. But I found that they work in three different ways. You can either go to a life that involves releasing some energy, physically, mentally, or emotionally, that's from a past life that's somehow affecting this life. Sometimes you go to a really fantastic, pleasant life, and you're supposed to see that. And many times these lives just involve soul lessons. So I'll give a few examples of each type, and I'm kind of, one of the types, what I first mentioned is releasing energies that no longer serve us. They got carried over. Physically, here's an example of someone releasing energy physically. This woman had chronic headaches for 30 years and tried everything. Finally, she came to do past life regression. That's usually not the first the place that someone checks for healing stuff. But she did past life regression, and she went to the source of it, and she found that she was an early recipient of the first electroconvulsive therapies, where there was no anesthesia used, and it was very painful, and she could feel this band on her, and that is exactly where this band of headaches, the headaches would be, these migraines would be in this band right here. Well, once we were in the soul realm, we were able then to release that energy, and she told me several months later that she totally freed her migraines, never had any after that. Another one for healing physically was, and this is another example, because sometimes it works in different ways. This person came, he was a medical doctor, and he came in with, he had a frozen shoulder. Now, I don't know if he came in to really work on that frozen shoulder or not. He just wanted to go to a life that was for his highest benefit to see. But he went to a life where, basically, let me tell you, he had gone to the Mayo Clinic for years. He's trying to work on this frozen shoulder, nothing really worked. But he went to a life where he saw himself as could have been a Roman soldier, but he was a very powerful, strong figure, and he was killing people. He was left-handed in that life, and he was killing people. And he said at one point, he drove a sword into someone's eye, and then something dropped in as a download. Oh, this has to do with that frozen shoulder. When that life was over, we were up in the soul realm, and then at an unconscious level, maybe some of the guilt from that is weighing on him. So we were able to let the eternal part of him apologize to the eternal parts of everyone else and release that energy. And then he said it was 80% better after that. So that's an example of how energy can be released, in a physical way. Sometimes mental or emotional, like an example is someone came with a phobia of needles, horrible phobia of needles. In fact, so her boyfriend came to the session and had to write down what wanted to address and show it to me, because if she were to talk about it, it would cause her such panic. And so I said, okay, we'll go to a life that can show you the root of your fears here. And she went to a life that was somewhere in Europe, but she found herself on some kind of a psychiatric unit or a mental hospital, and she was getting injections that would calm her down, or whatever these injections were for. She interpreted them as poison, got very panicky and fearful, and she ended up dying in that hospital. Carried some of that energy up, and in the soul realms you could see, this is where it came from, and we were able to release that fear energy from her. And then and I didn't hear from her until 3 months later, and she said, oh, by the way, my phobia of needles is totally gone now. I was able to get some shots to, for immunization to go overseas. So sometimes, mental programs like that. Now, the Tibetans are a very spiritual group, and they will say that if you are going to die, try to die as peacefully as you can, because we have a physical energy body, a mental energy body, an emotional energy body, and that energy can get carried over to affect a future incarnation. So try to die peacefully if you can. But sometimes it's about soul lessons. I'll give you an example of someone that had a strong fear of driving over a bridge or walking over a bridge. Bridges gave her huge panic. And we did a past life regression where she found herself as a worker in San Francisco building either the Golden Gate Bridge or a different bridge very high up, ended up falling. She was a male in that life and ended up falling to her death. And that fear somehow got stuck in the energy bodies. And we were able to release that. And then again, 6 months after the session, she sent me an email and said, that fear of bridges is gone now. So that's how it can work. But your inner mind is going to show you, like I said, it's going to show you something that can help you move forward. Here's another way it can work. A woman came to me because she had this great fear. She had a lot of anxiety, but she had a fear that she was going to somehow hurt her son or harm her son. And that anxiety was so strong. Interestingly enough, she had 4 miscarriages. And she wanted to get to the bottom of that fear. Well, your inner guidance knows. She went to a life where she saw herself as a decorated World War I officer. Perhaps it was England, I'm not sure. But she sent many men to their deaths, or I should say, as the officer, the man sent many men to their deaths, and that guilt weighed on him. And after the war was over, he went and visited some of the families of the men that died under his command, and he saw all these widows and the children, and couldn't get over the thought of, I created all of these fatherless children. I created all of these widows. And he had such a profound feeling of guilt that he went through that life thinking, if people knew the real me, they wouldn't. People knew the real me, they wouldn't like me. And so he couldn't take in other people's love or appreciation. He kind of ended up becoming this old grumpy man and dying. But it was only after the death scene when he rose up and he stayed around for the funeral and he could see all the people being very positive about him, then he could take in their love for the first time. And in the soul realm, as we went a little bit higher, she was able to see that all that belief, that pattern was very stuck, and that was what was behind her fear of harming her child. You never know what you're going to get. Sometimes it's, well, what's not sometimes, most of the time, what I hear when people emerge is, wow, that's not at all what I would have expected. So your higher guidance just will give you whatever it is that you need. Was that an actual past life? It could have been. Could have been a metaphor, but it really doesn't matter. This is all, it's higher self therapy. It's connecting to your own higher self on these inner journeys. And, you know, they have these now on YouTube. You can practice trying on yourself, doing a regression experience. Although it is easier to be guided by someone because it helps keep the left brain analytical mind out of the way. That's another example of how it works. One of the things it does is it's all about, so that's about releasing energies. Sometimes it's about getting a soul lesson. And an example of that was a woman came to me who had a fear of commitment in relationship, and went to a life where she was a woman who grew up with very low self-esteem, thought, how could anyone really love me? And if someone did actually marry her, and it was good for a while, but she had a hard time taking in his love because of her own beliefs about herself, which came from her growing up experience in this past life here. And the marriage began to fall apart and crumble, and after he died, she had regrets that there wasn't a good, loving, there hadn't been a loving relationship there. There could have been. When she was in the soul realm, she had those regrets too, and she knew then, when you're in that soul, it's like, oh, okay, now I don't want to repeat that pattern. Life is about loving and creating that, being able to create that love, being able to feel that love that's there and not live from these old programs that don't serve me anymore. And so she realized that old program was still at an unconscious level holding her back. About a year later, she got married, and now she's a very successful life coach. So sometimes your inner mind will show you something that can mirror some unconscious patterns. Basically, what past life regression can do is it basically shines a spotlight on any unconscious programs that are limiting us that you may not even be aware of. But when you see those, oh, okay, now we can release them and let them go. Here's an example of a woman came to me who was 60 years old, and her mother had just passed away. And she had tears in her eyes. And she said, I just really want to know if my mother loved me. It didn't feel like it, but yet logically, like I could probably logically say, yeah, she probably loved you, yeah, but she's stressed. Yeah, maybe the logical mind can say that, but yet at a deep level, there's part of her that never felt very lovable from her mom because she wasn't made to feel that way. Well, we did a past life regression again, and she saw a life where she's a very wealthy woman. And she had a big family, and there was nothing to want for. A good, successful family relationship, loved her husband, loved her kids. But when one of her daughters reached the age of 9, her daughter got sick and died. And in her words, she said, I was too grief-stricken to nurture the other children. She said, these are her words, it feels like part of me is gone. The other children need me, but I can't be there all the way. I never got over it. And in the soul realm, she said, I couldn't give my children what they needed. The love was there, but it just couldn't be expressed. Then it began to sink in. Oh, that's the way my mother's life was. The love was there, but it just couldn't be expressed. And then she got that at a deep level, at a core level, at a soul level, at a cellular level. She was able to get that. And then a week or so later, or a few days after that, she wrote, it's the most unusual thing. As a result of this past life regression, I know my mother loves me. It always felt like she didn't love me because I thought she saw something in me that was not lovable, not worthy of love. And I was given a gift from my higher self. It's a gift of knowing I was loved by my mom. I was unable to know this deep down. Knowing is the only word that I can think of to use, yet it doesn't feel quite the same as knowing in everyday terms. What she's talking about is knowing from the mind. This is knowing from your whole being. I'm so grateful. This is a gift more valuable than any gift. And I shared some commentary on that case, and I said, this past life regression, it's an effective means to help you understand and know at a deep core level the truth of your value and worth, as well as becoming more acutely aware of the love within a family that's there, even if it's expressed or not, a love that's there beneath all the hurts and misunderstandings. And that's because this is a process that bypasses the intellectual mind and it trumps the subconscious beliefs of unworthiness, which are based in life's hurtful experiences. So the process, it connects you to your higher soul dimension of yourself that is not only based in love, but can also see through all that subconscious mind programming and conditioning from the earth life. So it's about going within, connecting to that higher part of you. The theme is, as you go within, you get what you need. And we're not separate from that. We couldn't be. But of course it does get covered up. I want to talk a little bit about life between life sessions. Those are much longer because after the death scene, instead of stopping and just kind of reflecting on that life and why and getting a sense of why you saw what you saw and how it relates to this life, that's where all the puzzle pieces fall into place and the healing can happen. But instead of doing that, you just go deeper and deeper into that soul realm. When I read Michael Newton's book, Journey of Souls, I thought, I want to get training with this guy before he retires. And thankfully I did, just prior to him retiring for good, back in 2004. But that is really about deeply going within, going on this inner journey and really connecting to your higher self, your higher guidance system. Your whole what happens is you as an energy being, as you go within, your vibration starts to raise a little bit higher, a little bit faster. Now, most people don't necessarily feel the vibrations in their body raising, but what they notice is the side effects, and the side effects is information starts dropping in downloads of intuitive knowing. And as you go deeper into that soul realm, you feel more and more synonymous with peace, with love, with joy, like it's not separate from you. And you also, the analytical thinking mind, that chatterbox mind that's always there that we notice when we're meditating, dead silent, it's quiet. And it feels like it would be almost an effort to employ that because your vibration is raised so much that your consciousness is anchored in the here and now. And then when you're in that place, then you can read books by the sages, Eckhart Tolle, Leonard Jacobson, and know exactly what they're saying. They're writing from that place. And that's within ourselves. But people then get a sense of connecting to their own higher guidance system. Sometimes they'll see loved ones that have passed over because their vibration is so high. The reason is many times loved ones that have passed over can visit us in dreams. And they do that because our analytical mind, the filters of the mind aren't there while we're sleeping. And this is a same process. The filters of the mind aren't there. It's like blank, open, receptive consciousness. And then it's not uncommon to get visits from the other side. One that I did, though, with one person sticks out, because he came to the session with a whole list of questions. Most people do, sometimes 10 pages of questions, sometimes just a handful. And when you're in that higher vibration, it's like you ask a question and you just get a download. And sometimes you can get a whole page of questions answered like that, just as an inner knowing. But he came with a bunch of questions and he saw his guides there. And so he started asking his guides different questions about him and his life and what life's about. And they instead said to him, no, you know all the answers to these questions. Wait a second, no, we're not your teachers, you're our teacher. And then the downloads began to come in. They said, we're kind of taking notes. You're this incredible soul that's come down here in this human experience. You voluntarily separated yourself from Source, from your conscious connection to Source. And we're kind of taking notes of how does that happen? How does a person or a soul voluntarily separate and cut themselves off from Source, from knowing who and what they are? And knowing they're not separate from all the love, safety, security that they're looking for, they voluntarily cut themselves off. And then they begin this journey of awakening to who and what they really are. How does that happen? And so they were taking notes, and it began, and they said to him, Jesus had many people taking notes while he would voluntarily went into this life and voluntarily cut himself off from Source and then found his way of waking up. And that's one of the things we're doing here, is to awaken to who and what we really are. We're these brilliant soul beings, but of course in this human experience, it's not uncommon to be held back by fears or limiting beliefs. But those fears and limiting beliefs, if you can become aware of what they are, then you know precisely of what it is, of what one of your soul's mission is to see through them, not be chained by them, and live from your true self, your true essence. When you go within, you connect to your true essence. And you don't have to do it in the ways that this is the way I do it, this is the way I guide people, but there's many ways out there. As you go within, you tend to get what you need. Does anyone have a question? Oh yeah.
So it sounds like the work that we do in this life, if we can better ourselves, is going to help future us. And it sounds like that's some of the goal in your therapy as well.
Yeah, it's to be able to see, the goal of the therapy is to see where we're being held back and how we can grow and improve. We're here to grow and evolve, and growing and evolving means becoming more conscious and aware of who and what we are, really, and try to live from that, the grandness that we are. Yeah, and then that's our mission. That's one of the things we're doing here. There's a master plan, and that is just awakening to our true higher self. We're these multi-dimensional beings that at the highest level we're interconnected. It's all one. Oneness is the ultimate truth. And to be able to live from that truth in this body, that's what true awakening is, and enlightenment. Yeah.
You spoke about the last example with the souls in between lives.
Yeah.
And could it be also that if you're interconnected with another person throughout different lives,
Mm-hmm.
like say a sister?
Yeah.
So for me, I had a sister pass away, and I've been told that she's been stuck. You know, she's in one of those lives in between lives,
Yeah.
and it's impacting me.
Mm-hmm.
So have you ever had this where, you know, if I were to go and work, would that help release her, or is
She's
she,
impacting you
Mhm.
in a...
We were very connected here in this
Yeah.
life, and on many levels.
Yeah.
And she's, yeah, so, and I think she's slowly evolving in this life in between lives.
Sure.
I mean, I really don't know anything about this, just
Okay.
how it's been impacting me.
Yeah.
But have you ever seen that? Like,
Where,
with,
like
could
you're
I
so
work
interconnected.
so that I can help
that-
her go in some way? Like, or help her, you know, stop, I don't know if I want to say stop, but change her interacting with my life,
Yeah.
if that makes sense?
If you don't want her to interact with you anymore, and if it's interfering, you
It
can
is.
tell her that.
Well, it was, and it's better. But I
Yeah.
just wanted to know if you'd ever seen that. With,
Not too often. Sometimes there can almost feel as though her energy is attaching itself to
Mm-hmm.
you. And if that's the case, you can just almost get a sense of her energy and then releasing it and telling her. It's almost what I would say is in a meditation, imagine that you're in a room that belongs to you, and then you invite her to come in, a door, and you see her there, and you just tell her, no, your energy can't be attached to me. It's really holding me back. And so you get a sense of her energy releasing and going back to her, and telling her to move up into the shaft of light until
and
it
I've done
continue,
that, yeah.
so she can continue to grow and evolve as a soul and not impact you in a negative way. So occasionally that can happen in a negative way. Sometimes souls can come back and be guides to us, but it sounds like in your case, it's more something that's getting in your way and holding you back.
Yeah, it had been, and I
Yeah.
had done work with somebody,
Yeah.
and had, you know, released her,
Yeah.
and that made a tremendous
Yeah.
impact on my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to know if you'd seen that. With,
Once in a while, I do. Yeah. It's rare, but I see it. Thank you for that question.
Okay, we're in this realm right now.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you help people like with coping skills
Uh-huh.
in our daily lives.
Yeah.
Because for me, I feel like all this stuff is always coming at me all the time, and I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, I don't want this in my life anymore. And where am I supposed to, do with all these life experiences or these people?
It feels like you take on other people's thoughts, feelings, emotions, energies.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The first thing to do is, what I would say is, become very clear of what your own energy is.
That scares people.
What's that?
And that scares people. I get stuff like, you're over enthusiastic,
Oh.
and always people going, no, no,
No,
no,
no.
no, no, no.
Yeah, as a soul, you're meant to be enthusiastic, because your soul is pure enthusiasm, and you're meant to be a clear body, mind vessel for the brilliance of your enthusiastic soul to shine through. And if other people have a problem with that, maybe that's their soul lesson, too, to deal with that.
Okay.
But you don't, but what a good thing, if you're taking on, some people are very empathic sometimes, and they take on other people's stuff. If it feels like it's not your energy, ground it into the earth, and then say a prayer or blessing to them. But ground that through the earth and into the earth and bless them, and then you get a sense of, that's yours. This is me. And sometimes just a matter of, if you're feeling you're sitting somewhere and you're feeling like, this is these other energies, it's not all mine, consciously get up, walk around to the other side of the room, sit down and say, okay, I'm leaving all of that energy behind, now I'm going to walk down and this is mine. And then you can feel yours. So you make that statement of intent to yourself.
But I feel like these experiences are lessons for me too, and how I can evolve to something to help other people.
Yeah. If they're lessons, the best way is, what would the highest form of love do in this situation? Then you'll know your answer. Yeah.
Yes, I was wondering if with your clients, after they've released a lot of the stuff that they're releasing in sessions, and they go back to their regular life, and then they get some of the same feelings associated with what they already thought they had released, because thoughts come into their mind that are not self-serving, or not serving their higher self. Do you find that they're better able to then consciously recognize what they're doing and sort of release it again, or do a mini release?
What tends to happen is, once you go into whatever feeling, thought pattern that's not serving you, and you meet it, let it show you where it came from, and we did some releasing with it, that will release its grip on your subconscious mind. And sometimes it's a little bit more, and then there'll be a little bit more, but it releases its grip on it, on you. And so it happens in layers. Healing can happen in layers. But usually the first one that we go in with is the biggest layers. One of the things I like to do is, oftentimes we can pick up a lot of our unbeneficial thought patterns from somewhere in our growing up experience, many times from our caregivers early on. And you can imagine taking that thought form energy, and if you got it from mom or a dad that was neglectful or abusive, you can give that thought form energy back, the thoughts, feelings, and energies back to them. Then they in turn can pass it back to wherever they got it from. And they pass it back through the generations, because the programs of unworthiness and shame often get passed down through the generations like an unconscious virus. Once you're conscious of it, you can release it all back through the generations, and then everyone can come together and have a big bonfire with that energy and burn it up, because fire is a purifier. And then everyone lines up, and then a tsunami wave of light, you get back that part that was covered up and lost, and it comes through the generations, and you see and feel it and sense it coming into your own system. And then then you take that lighter energy of empowerment, strength, love, go on up above the timeline of your life, and then move through. It's like you beam that down to that junior high kid that took it on, and that 5-year-old kid that took it on, and maybe into the womb. You beam it down into them, and then let your consciousness come down and rescript it. You go through those scenes with different energies, with a different cellular signature, with your power, your strength. And when you go through that, what that does is it kind of reprograms the cellular memory. And this is something that you can do on your own as a guided meditation. Of course, it is easier to do it guided, but it's something that you can do in a ceremony. And I'm looking at the time, and I'm feeling that it's about time to wrap up, so. Thank you. Quick question? Uh-huh. Yeah.
Even sometimes I'll see people, I'll see them doing things, that they may not even be doing, but mentally inside their head. And I think that's from, I even saw that in the military.
Okay.
But I think it's from life before that my guys experienced
Okay.
it. Kind of hearing to it with military, I don't even say
Okay.
how to react to people's situations.
That could be. Okay. I'm going to hold off, and I'll answer questions afterwards, but I'm mindful of the time, and I want to be respectful with your time here because we've kind of gone over the time limit right now. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Okay, thank you, Eric Christopher.